If you want to sail around the world, to say that you've done it, well, don't do it because you have the wrong attitude. If you really, really want to do something because you love the ocean, you want to see the world as it is still now, before it is too late, then do it.
On the Wind is sponsored by Schooner Woodwind Sailing Cruises in Annapolis, the place that I started my career on the two 74-foot wooden schooners. They do 2-hour day sails for public cruises and private charters. If you've got a business, want to bring your company out for a team building or just a fun day on the water, we can do private charters. Pretty cool full circle moment. We bought the business last fall, in case you missed the memo. You can go to schoonerwoodwind.com to buy public sail tickets. They're available for every day we're sailing for the rest of the summer through the end of October. And of course, we're going to be doing our Woodwind sail with 59 North in October at Annapolis Sailboat Show. We've got the Schooner Race, which is a big special event in October, the trip back, the adventure cruise back up the bay, and lots of other stuff that we're kind of co-mingling between 59 North and Woodwind. So if you want to buy a ticket to take your family sailing, or if you're a business and want to check out our private charters, go to schoonerwoodwind.com. On the Wind is also presented by BVI Yacht Sales, our friends in the Caribbean and Annapolis. They can buy or sell your dream boat. You don't need to have a boat that they're listed for them to be your broker. They're good friends, personal friends of Mia and I for many, many years, and I'm checking out their website right now on June 16th. They've got 2 really unique boats that maybe you don't want to buy them, but if you do, they're freaking awesome. They've got a 1994 Bristol Channel Cutter, one of the coolest boats ever, Lynn and Larry Party's original boat. Check it out. It's called Little Wing. That's actually in Florida. And then they've got a very unique 1963 Camper Nicholson's 36. This is only $29,000. It's in the Dominican Republic. It's outfitted for cruising. If you want a cheap, very cool, classic boat that's already in the Caribbean, check that out. And if nothing else, just go to their website and look at the pictures. The boats are amazing. I love these. You know me, I'm a sucker for these old classic boats. So check those out on bviyachtsales.com. Their home base is in Tortola. They've been doing this since 1981, and they are trusted friends of ours. August and I joke about broker BS on our boat listings podcasts, but of all the people out there, I think you can trust these guys. So thanks again for BVI Yacht Sales for sponsoring the show, and check out their listings or get in touch at bviyachtsales.com. We had our first mini vacation on Spica this weekend. First time sailing with a new mast and new sails. We were out for 3 days. I think both you and I agreed it felt like we were out for it almost felt like just an extension from last summer. Are you excited now we're going to spend 4 to 5 weeks on the boat as a family now coming up in July. I know you are excited. How excited are you? What are you excited about specifically?
Well, I'm really excited. Like you said, it felt like we were out for a week, and it was amazing because me and Axel drove over to Saltsjöbaden on Friday, and we kind of popped straight out. And within 1 hour of sailing, we had like this magical, beautiful anchorage. And for the weekend, we went to 3 different anchorages within like 5 miles of each other. And I'm super excited to just have more time. It feels like none of us were ready to go back.
No, least of all Axel, who was not very happy about going to school this morning.
He laid in bed and was like, I want to not go to school today. I want to be home. It's like, yeah, me too.
Shout out to Frederick, who we met in Kalvholmarna on the boat Happy, podcast listener. Hopefully he hears this. Do you think, he said, people often meet us in the wild, so to speak, and are surprised that when we're on vacation, we also go sailing.
I know, it's like, what do you do when you don't work? Well, we go sailing. But what else would we do? I love it. I mean, it's so nice. And I think it's also so different because, with Falcon, you go from, I just spent the spring of Falcon, and we sailed over 4,000 miles, and I love it. But this is so different. It's almost like the difference between like going walk on the beach versus hike in the mountains. It's so many different kinds of sailing.
Yeah, I think for me, I've said this before, but like I have a much greater satisfaction with just bopping around cruising now, having done all the miles we've done with 59 North, that it's really, I enjoy that. But I think the bigger point is like, I don't know that people quite understand how much our lives are entangled with 59 North. Like, this is not just a business for me and you. Like, this is legitimately our entire life, our entire lifestyle. And it's been a challenge incorporating Axel into that because you and I basically just did everything before. But, this is truly what we love doing the most. I was lamenting to you before, like, oh, is it worth all the hassle of getting the boat ready every year? We only sail it for 6 weeks in the summer. Is it really worth it? And like this weekend, it's like, yes, 100% it's worth it. This is amazing. I love this. And like you said, what would we do at home? I mean, cut the grass?
Yeah, and I was thinking that too. Like, what did we do before we started 59 North? We had Arcturus and we sailed in the archipelago, bumped between the same anchors we're doing now. And like, I think with sailing for me, whether it's on Falcon going offshore or being on Spica, it just brings that such of satisfaction of like, you get calm, things slow down, and it's just a happy place for me, whether it's cruising the archipelago between anchorages and swimming or going offshore night watches. You know, to me, it's just a happy place.
I've always said I'm the best version of myself when I'm on the boat, and I think it doesn't matter whether that's Falcon, Eastbjorn, or now Spica.
No, exactly.
This is like a segue into we're now, because we are running a business, trying to promote the trips that we still have open. And we've always said, like, as we've added capacity over the years, we're always stressed out about, are we going to be able to fill that? Is there enough demand for it? And we've got some trips coming up this fall. We've had an enormous amount of cancellation, not enormous. We've had a lot of cancellations this year for many different reasons. And it's always harder, people book these trips because they're a pretty big deal really far in advance. And it's always harder to fill last minute cancellations. I asked you before we started recording, does it stress you out? You said you don't really know. It kind of does stress me out a little bit.
I mean, of course it stresses me out, but also like, I think we've had probably, if I'm looking back, I don't have the numbers, but similar amount of cancellations. But last year, remember, a lot of them came like straight after the boat show. And it's a little bit easier to fill last minute spots like over the fall and the winter because there are less sailing on their own and people have less plans. I think when we're getting a last minute cancellation, like we just had a cancellation like a couple weeks ago for the Hawaii to BC trip.
And Falcon's in Hawaii now, so that trip starts in like 10 days or
and
something.
That is still open. And I understand because so many people have sent me an email like, I would love to do that trip, but it's conflicting with X. Whether it's like a graduation, not maybe not graduation, but like summer vacation, or like people have a hard time getting one, like, 3.5 weeks off in the middle of the summer. So I think that's why it stresses me out a little bit when we get a last minute cancellation in the spring, for the summer, because I know the summer, especially the long trips, are harder for people to join just for like logistical reasons. I mean, who has the whole month of July to just drop everything? Most people have something planned in July.
You and I are going to do a full episode this season coming up in the next couple of weeks about this kind of thing and what stresses us out, what makes us excited, where the state of 59 North, basically. We're going to do that. We've been meaning to do that for a long time now, but we're going to do that before the end of this season.
Yeah, and what stresses me out, I think, the most about having one open space on a trip like that, like you have Hawaii to BC, which is like a really, really cool trip. It's a long offshore trip. It's great weather. Like it's such a good trip. And to not be able to give that opportunity to someone because someone canceled last minute, I mean, if that would have been open in the January, there would have been 10 people knocking on the door wanting to do this trip. So I really hope we can find that person who can take that opportunity because it's a really good trip. Do you know what I mean?
Totally. You can see all of our open bunks at 59-north.com/bunks. One trip in particular that's open in November is Monterey Bay, so just south of San Francisco, to Ensenada in Mexico. I am skippering that trip. There's 3 bunks open on that. I'd love to sail with you. So come on out and join me on, that's the second to last trip of the year. And then I don't know. It's one of the last trips of the year. We've got another trip, the same route, but in reverse, Ensenada to Monterey Bay. That's in September. And then a couple trips on Eastbjorn in Iceland and for the GGR start. So anyway, I'll stop blabbering. Just check that out at 59-north.com/bunks.
Yeah, and those fall trips are much easier for people to join because it's 1 week long. You don't have to drop the whole summer plans for those trips. So those are easier to join. Like I said, they're only 1 week long. So hopefully, and I know those bunks, I'm sure, will be filled at some point.
Yeah. Okay, what else? Today's episode, Mia, finally, we've had Jimmy Cornell on. You haven't heard this yet. I'm very excited for you to hear it. He has a wild, wild life story.
That's awesome. Yeah, I can't wait to hear that.
I mean, I sit here when I make these calendars, I've got his book, World Cruising Routes, on the shelf behind me, and he's starting to come out with a new edition that's going to be app-based. So, like, you can basically plug in, I want to go from here to here, and the book will, like, the app will tell you what the conditions are going to be like.
That's awesome. I think also if people don't recognize the name Jimmy Cornell, I'm sure everyone have at least flipped through their book on one of the people's bookshelves.
Well, I think everybody listening to this podcast will at least have heard of the ARC Rally, and he started the ARC Rally in 1986. So, I mean, it's crazy. He's been around the world 3 times, started the ARC Rally, started all this stuff, wrote all these books. But it's also like there's a huge contradiction in here. I asked him about this, where he was lamenting about how the Earth has changed in a bad way since he did all his stuff. And I was like, is that just nostalgia? Do you really think that? And are you responsible for it? I mean, he is largely responsible for the amount of cruising sailors going around the world. He's like, ground zero for that. He was the initial inspiration. And there's a bit of a contradiction there because he feels like not all of that progress has been good. And we talk about that later in this episode.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big question.
It's a very big question. Very excited for you guys to hear this. Thank you for listening. If you do meet us in the wild this summer on Spica, please come and say hello. We love to hear from real people, so don't be shy.
And if you see Falcon or Isbjörn in one of the ports, stop by and say hi as well.
If you do see us on Spica, you will know it's us because we will be the loudest boat in the anchorage because Axel does not know how to moderate his voice. So he's very loud. You'll find us.
Yes, you do.
All right, Mia, until next week.
Hold fast.
You're listening to On the Wind, my podcast about offshore sailing. I'm your host, Andy Schell. The one and only Jimmy Cornell joins the podcast for the first time to talk about his legendary career as the Godfather of offshore cruising. Jimmy, now 86, has led an extraordinary life. He escaped communist Romania to go on to become one of the icons of cruising under sail. Jimmy circumnavigated 3 times, sailed to the far north and the far south, and recently published the 10th edition of his cruising Bible, World Cruising Routes. Jimmy and I discuss his remarkable career on this wide-ranging and wild podcast conversation.
I'm in London, in very central London, Bloomsbury.
Do you live in London?
Yes, I've been lived here for the last 50 years. Well, on and off, because half of my life I spent on my boat. So it's an exaggeration. Actually, more than half of the last 50 years I've been on a boat, so not really here.
Where do you feel at home? Because you're not British either, or are you by naturalization, or what is your? I mean, you're kind of a citizen of the world, so to speak.
It goes back a long way, but I was born in Romania 86 years ago, and then to fast forward, I met this English girl 63 years ago, Gwenda. We eventually managed to get married. It took us about 5 years because under the communist dictatorship, we were not allowed as Romanian citizens to marry a foreigner, any kind of foreigner. So that was a long time. By that time, we already had a child. Then we had a second child. I came to London in 1969. I started working in the BBC External Service, the BBC World News, and then in the Romanian language section. So this is how I came to England all those years ago. If you want me to carry on with the story that brings us more or less to this moment, having left Romania, and my father died as a political prisoner in prison. I tried to escape, and I didn't manage to do it. I tried to swim to a Norwegian ship, and on the way back I was shot. But anyway, I escaped. Eventually, I managed to come to England.
Wait! You swam to a Norwegian ship and were shot? I want to hear what.
Long story. All right. Well, let's go back.
We've got time. If you've got time, this is fascinating.
Yes, it is fascinating. Yes, for some people. For me, it's just an old memory. Right. So now, with a friend of mine who was of German origin, because I went to a German school. There's a very large community. German community for the last 800 years in Brasov, where I grew up. And I went to a German school. I did all my education in German. And my closest friend had family in Germany. And to cut the story short, my father died in prison, and I didn't want to stay in Romania if I could get out. So in 1959, we were 19. We went to the sea. Romania has a short coast on the Black Sea, and we could see that there were always too many ships. They couldn't get into the harbor. So we realized that they had to anchor off, about 3 miles off. So we were both good swimmers. So one night we swam out to this ship. There were 3 of them. We saw one AB ship from Oslo, Anita B, and we screamed and shouted that they heard us. We lowered the ladder. We climbed up on board. The crew welcomed us. The captain came to see us, and we said, we both wanted to go. Explained who I was, what had happened to me. My friend explained. I spoke English enough to speak to them, and we were hoping that we would be able to hide us somewhere on the ship and take us to somewhere and then put us ashore in the free world, as it were. Well, unfortunately, within about an hour after we had arrived, they had the call from the port authorities that a small ship sailing across our route we had swam had seen a person in the water. They said they've seen somebody, and there was an alert, and they asked this Norwegian ship whether they'd seen anyone. And the captain gave the order to the radio officer to say, no, they hadn't seen anything. And they said, look, the game is up. We can't take a risk. They'll probably come and search us. And if they find you, you end up in prison. You have to swim back. Well, that wasn't an easy decision, but indeed, we swam back. We got separated. There were a very strong current. I was the strongest swimmer. I was very concerned that my friend wouldn't make it. I came very close to the shore in front of the old casino. There is an old building. And as I started attempting to climb up to the slippery rocks where we had left our clothing, someone I heard, stop. And the next thing I I felt that I'd been hit in my leg, in my right leg. And I realized these were the border guards. So fortunately, I managed to jump back into the water and swim around the corner of this building and to go up, climb up onto the esplanade in front of this, as I called it, the old casino. And then I hid in a park. And eventually, when I saw no more movement, I went back to we left our clothing. I was bleeding from just under my knee, but I could walk. And then my friend also came within maybe an hour, and we said, well, the game was up. So we said, we're going to give up. And that was it. He didn't want to give up. He was caught on the Yugoslav border about 6 months later, and he went to prison for three years, my friend. So that is the story. It's a long story, but this is what happened. That's how I started all those years ago. So anyway, eventually I made it to the United Kingdom and to freedom.
Are you generally an optimistic person?
More than optimistic.
I mean, that, like, where do you think that comes from?
Well, I don't know. If you, well, I mean, we live now in a very uncertain world and so on. I mean, if you're not optimistic, then you might as well commit suicide. I mean, why should you live? I'm an optimist. I'm a fatalist, because people in Transylvania are fatalistic, which is another good trait to have, because if something is going to happen, it's going to happen anyway. So you might as well be prepared for it like a good sailor, but it's going to happen. So this is why I'm very happy to be at sea, and I'm never scared of whatever is going to happen, because on the one hand, I'm well prepared. My boat is well prepared, or was prepared. I'm not sailing anymore. So yes, I'm an optimist.
So specifically, when you were swimming out to this Norwegian ship, did this stuff happen a lot back in communist times? Or was this were the ships from the free world, so to speak, generally sympathetic to folks like you?
No, well, generally speaking, people always try to escape. There were people trying, mostly over the Yugoslav border, because Yugoslavia in those days was semi-free. Although they had Tito and there was a sort of communist regime, but it was quite an open system. And they generally did not turn the people in. But very often, even if you manage to cross the dry border or swim across the Danube into Yugoslavia, you had to hide because people in the vicinity of the border had been bribed by the Romanian authorities to hand in, and they would get quite a large amount of money for that. So very often I knew of people who had managed to escape, cross over all of Yugoslavia, get into Italy, and then they were free. So this happened also. People also managed to build a small boat and sail across the Black Sea to Turkey. So there were various attempts of people to escape the communist dictatorship. But I tried to, but eventually I found, not that I didn't find, but I was very fortunate to meet Gwenda, and I managed to get out of Romania, as it were, legally.
So when you were younger, living in Romania, before you said you were 19 when you did this swim attempt, right?
Yes.
So did you have enough, I guess, freedom or optimism or whatever you want to call it? Did you think what you wanted to do when you grow up, so to speak? Like, did you have a plan back then besides just escaping Romania? Like, what did you want to do if you could have done anything?
Well, first of all, yes, of course, I wanted to get out. Everyone wanted to get out. There was nothing special about that. On the other hand, why I wanted to become a sailor, that's quite important to my life, is that I have a photograph, and I could send it to you if you want me to. When I was 4 years old, and I was in a sailor suit. It was very fashionable. I was 4 years old. I want to believe, probably nothing in it, but I want to believe because of that, I always wanted to become a sailor. And that is true, because cut the story again very short, otherwise I'll be here all day. And when I came to England, the first thing I told my wife, Gwenda, I said, look, I haven't told you so far, but I would like to tell you that what I really want to be is I want to become a sailor. And she said, well, yeah, sailor what? Well, I want to sail the world, and okay, well, that has to wait, because we already have one child, the second one will be born next month. So she said, well, you better wait for that. But then I managed to get this job at the BBC. And I said to Gwenda, look, I really want to see the world. And she said, well, yes, but what do you want? Well, I like to have a boat and sail the world, around the world eventually, and so on. I said, well, we don't have any money. So I was earning quite well. So I said, well, yes, I couldn't build a boat or buy a boat. So I bought a hull, an empty hull. And I managed over 2 years to fit out this boat, and resigned from the BBC, and eventually we left. So this is something, again, it takes too long to explain, but I was absolutely determined to do it. And fortunately, Gwenda was very good. She always agreed with me if I really wanted to do something, to do it. This idea that I wanted to do this voyage, I just felt that it's something that very recently I came across a saying by Alexander the Great, Alexander of Macedonia, who, by the way, he did manage to conquer Persia, i.e. today is around 2,500 years ago, but that's an old story. But what Alexander the Great said, there is no such thing as impossible for him who tries. This is a Greek, translated from Greek. And I've always tried. I said, if something can be done, even if it looks impossible, I'll try to do it. And I did manage. I really fitted out that empty hull, and we set off with Gwenda and our 2 children. They were 5 and 7 at the time, and we're away for 6 years. And I'll make you very jealous here, because I did a podcast every week from my boat. This goes back over 50 years ago, and I was sending back tapes to the BBC in Romanian for the Romanian service, but also in English. And I did a lot of contributions to various programs for the BBC. So when I came back, I was very popular, and also people appreciated the work I'd done over all these years. So they gave me back my seniority, and I went back to the BBC to work for another 5 years. So again, a long story.
What was there? Romania is on the Black Sea, right? But was there any sailing culture whatsoever? Like, where did you even get the idea that to go? You kind of invented the idea of cruising in some way, but what was your specific inspirations? Because I imagine it didn't come from Romania.
No, it wasn't. No, because you were not allowed. You couldn't have any kind of boat. Some fishermen were allowed to go out for 1 mile or 2 miles, but no, absolutely no. There was some sailing, maybe dinghy sailing. I don't know. My idea was always, having read various books like Kon-Tiki and sailing stories, and eventually I knew enough that, yes, that people nowadays, I'm talking about 80 years ago, would sail and would go on a long voyage on a small boat. So I had an idea about this, but I came to England. I had never done any sailing. The BBC had a dinghy club, so I sailed on the Thames and I learned a little bit of that. The BBC also had a yacht, so I sailed on that yacht, and eventually I learned that, and of course I did then courses in navigation and radio, Morse, and all the rest. And in the meantime, in parallel with that, Gwenda, who is a pharmacologist, and she worked in research, medical research, she requalified as a teacher. She taught in London for 2 years to be able to teach the children, which she did very successfully during those 6 years. So when the children came back, they reintegrated very easily and very quickly. So, I mean, it looked like a crazy idea, but we're very serious about preparing the boat, preparing ourselves, taking the education and the lives of our children very seriously. So we were very well prepared.
Well, like you came to England, I think, what, late 60s, early 70s?
1969.
So that was like as Knox Johnston and Moitessier are doing their round the world thing. Were you aware of that? And Chichester was a hero by then, like in England. Were you aware of that thing going along? And did that have anything to do with your motivation?
No, I don't think so. I can't remember. I remember then I started, Gwenda brought me some sailing magazines while I was still in Romania, and I started reading. I can't remember Montessier, but I can tell you that I was in Hyde Park with Gwenda, 9 months pregnant, at the Rolling Stones concert in 1969. Yeah, with Doina, our daughter, 2 years old, and so on. So that I remember of 69, not Montessier, but the Rolling Stones.
That's pretty cool. So was sailing for you, is where on the spectrum between like the enjoyment of pursuing a technical craft versus using a boat as a means for travel and adventure?
Well, it started as a means to an end, definitely that, but it turned out to be my favorite environment. I became committed to the freedom of the sea, to the most memorable and the happiest moments of my life that I passed. And I can think back on were really when I was on the boat, on watch in the cockpit, on my own small boat, in the middle of the ocean, far from anything, looking at the beautiful sky, at the stars, the swell. These were the most beautiful moments. So this is why it started as an idea, exactly as you said, as a means to an end, to do the world. And this is why it took 6 years, and we did nearly 60,000 miles, zigzagging all over the place and so on, rather than sailing in a straight line and computer circumnavigation. That was exactly the opposite to that. And that has continued with me with all my following boat. The next one, I had 5 boats. I've sailed 3 times around the world. I've been to Antarctica twice. I've through the Northwest Passage, I've done over 200,000 miles. But it's always, from the beginning, then it is always because I'm really very, very happy. I find it, then I can't be happier anywhere compared to what I felt and experienced on my boat.
I asked you earlier, where do you feel where do you feel like is home?
At sea. But I'm, of course, now at this age, home is here. But it's home is, there's a saying about it. Home is what I decide to be at that very one moment. I don't set roots. I mean, I'm very happy to move. We lived for a while in France. But as I said, between 1960, when I came back in 1981 from the first voyage, then again I left in 85, and then I came back, and then again I left in 1999, and on and off I didn't come back for 7 or 8 years. So I've been more than half of the 50 years that lived in the West, by that stage, I spent at sea. Actually, more than that, more than half.
So where did the motivation come from to make something more of your sailing? And I'm getting to the rallies, the books, because like it sounds like you were successfully working for BBC, you were enjoying your extended circumnavigations, and yet there was something else motivating you there to kind of do something with all this knowledge. Like I get the impression that something wasn't content with you to just kind of cruise around. It seems to me like you needed a mission. Is that true? And where did that come from?
A purpose, maybe, yes, but not a mission. No, absolutely not a mission. There wasn't a purpose. I'm very disciplined. I always do what I set out to do and so on. But I was very fortunate. And because you see, everything came organically. Everything happened to me almost logically. And a couple of weeks ago, recently I was in Scotland. There was the annual meeting of the Ocean Cruising Club, and I was asked to say a few words, and I started by saying, because I always know what goes down well in Scotland, I said, I'm very happy to be here because it's the first place where it doesn't matter that I do not have an English accent. And of course, all the Scots started laughing. And then I said, well, in fact, it's very true, but not having an English accent was also an impediment at the beginning. And for this reason, when I left the BBC, there were various programs that the BBC was running for the World Service. I said, Jimmy, it would be very good if you could record some material for us, but we cannot use you because you don't have Queen's English or London Queen's English accent, which I accepted. So as soon as I got into the Caribbean, and I started a gathering program for my program, which was broadcast by the BBC in Romanian, so that it didn't matter that I didn't have an English accent. I started meeting a lot of interesting people in the Caribbean, and I realized that I didn't know, many people didn't know that, in fact, more than half, almost all the people in the Caribbean were of African origin. So I started talking to one of them and said, yes, of course, and we still have some of the traditions and customs and so on of our families that came forcibly into this part of the world 300, 250 years ago and so on. So I sent a telegram in those days to the head of the African service, and they said, look, I have these people, should I record some stuff? Oh, absolutely. So I started then recording programs and sending them to the BBC, and they used the programs with their person to do the links and so on. And then I started doing programs for others. So I realized then how much knowledge you can gather from other people by just interviewing them. So to cut the story short, eventually 3 years later in the South Pacific, I decided, because all the books about sailing and the methods of navigation and so on that I had used before I even were very subjective. There always only one opinion, the opinion of the writer. The author knew something, and obviously he presented it as if it was the truth. This was the only way to do things. I was exactly the opposite. Trained by the BBC, I just asked people, how do you do? What kind of reefing do you have? What kind of mast? What engine? Crew? Everything. And I asked all these questions of 62 captains of small boats, and I gathered all this into the material, and the magazine, I prepared an article, and it was published in all sailing magazines in the world. I still have some of them, because it was the very first time that somebody would present non-opinionated material. That it actually was very factual. I didn't say anything about myself. I didn't write about my boat, but everything, what those people, how much money they spent, how they managed to reef their boat, their attitude to sailing, their attitude, how they dealt with storms and so on. So that's what taught me the beauty of the interview. I can't tell it better than to you. You are the interviewer in this situation. I'm only giving the answer. And so I understood the value of how much you can gather and inform others on the BBC principle of inform, educate, and entertain. And I was always in the inform and sometimes in the entertain business. So this is how I learned to do. And this is how everything happened. I didn't set out to write. And then I thought, well, why doesn't somebody write a book about sailing? No, first of all, the first book was based on all these interviews, World Voyage Survey or something like that. And then I worked my best-selling book, actually, the World Sailing Routes, used to be called until now World Cruising Routes. It's sold well over 100,000 copies in the whole world. It's been translated to many languages.
There's one over my shoulder right here, actually.
Very pleased to see that. Well, that is not, the name is changed, and it will come out next year with an app, which I'm doing with my son. And this is how I started writing these books, and always strictly from what I learned from the BBC, objectivity. You are not the news. You are in the background, you present the facts, nothing more. And this is how my books became so successful. And this is how I continued. But also, I believe that I felt that I've been very fortunate, how I escaped from Romania, how I managed to do this voyage, my happy family life, all these voyages. I felt on my return, and I do feel now all the time that having been so fortunate, I have it's a kind of obligation. Yes, I think it's an obligation, a duty to pass on this knowledge and experience. And this is how came the books. And then my ideas about the rallies. I mean, I went down to do an interview and a article, a report for Yachting World magazine into the Canary Islands in 1985. And I saw all these people preparing and to cross the Atlantic and crying, separating from their friends they made in the marina and so on. I said, well, this is crazy. All of them going through, why don't they go together? And I think explain it very simply, because this was the very first transocean event that was organized. This was the first ARC, Atlantic Rally for Cruisers. We launched the idea in the Yachting World. We had nearly 200 participants in the first event in 1986, exactly 40 years ago, this coming November. So that, then later I said, well, yeah, okay, fine, transatlantic, how about around the world? So the first around the world rally was born, and so on. And now at this very moment, I launched at my age another event, which I realized that there's a lot of interest now in Antarctica, the Northwest Passage, and so on. I've been to both. And I launched this idea of the High Latitude Challenge. And I always say that if I have a crazy idea, I'm very fortunate that there are enough other crazy sailors that will go along with me. So I have these people who have signed up to this event starting in September this year. It's called the High Latitude Challenge. It will sail first to Antarctica, then around the Americas, all the way to the Northwest Passage and back. And we already have people signed up for the next year and the year after. My daughter Doina is in charge of it, but of course I help as much as I can. So I come back to your question. Everything happens in my life. I don't push things. And I know what is good for me. I know what I want. Like I told you earlier, I'm not on anything, any social media, because I feel that if I want to say anything, that I better write a book about and make it something useful, not to be anything else.
I can relate to your sort of, for lack of a better word, selfish idea of interviewing other people for your own knowledge, because that was literally the thesis for this podcast. This podcast I've had since 2013, and I just wanted an excuse to talk to people like yourself so I could learn from other people. And it's kind of taken a life of its own. And I guess what I think about when you tell me this story is, you know, the irony of what you said about how you learned to interview and how you're not the news, the BBC way. You have become famous in sailing circles for that. And does that make you uncomfortable on any level? Because now people look to you as a guru, even though your whole point was to try to stay out of the spotlight.
Well, I must admit that I don't like being famous. And I said this in German. I was in invited to speak to the German Sailing Federation in November, and I speak fluent German. And I said, look, I don't like being famous for being famous. If I'm well known or appreciated so for what I've done, that's okay. But I hate being famous. You see, this is the training, the BBC training. Be in the background. You are not the news. I'm not the news. I'm the author. I put my name on the books and so on. But after the forward, there is not I in my books. Yes, it is my experience that I choose the people, but I feel that this is who I am. I mean, I don't care about. I don't care. This one, I'm not in social media. I don't want to promote myself. I'm very happy to talk to you now because I know I have something to say and it will inspire other people. But to give you an example, this year, 2026 is the 70 years since the anniversary of my baccalaureate at this German gymnasium in Brașov, in Romania and Brașov. It's the oldest gymnasium in Eastern Europe from the 15th century. And I graduated there, and in the communist dictatorship days, schools finished with A-level in England. You call it baccalaureate in France at 16. So I only did 10 classes. In Romania, now they've gone back. The school was until they're in the lyceum or gymnasium until 18. So I contacted the headmaster of the current headmaster of the school. I said, I would like to come back. I'd like to meet the students and maybe to talk to them what I have achieved in the 70 years since I was there. So 3 weeks ago, Gwenda and I got into our car and we drove all the way 3,000 kilometers to Brașov in Romania. And I was there for the graduation ceremony, and I spoke for about 10 minutes. And I just told them, I'm here for you to understand. You are starting your lives, I'm close to the end of my life. What can be achieved? What I owe to this school, this German school that has taught me, my teachers have taught me discipline and the value of knowledge, honesty, and I want to give back something to you. I only spoke for about 10 minutes. And then all the students came at the back. And that's, of course, being a German school, and I have my memoir, I don't call it an autobiography, Share the Word with Me in German. So every one of them got a signed copy. And the headmaster came and said, I can't understand you. How did you decide to come all the way here to make a presentation? And then I realized for other people, that sometimes people don't understand. They either take you for granted or they think you're stupid, or both. They say, well, how could anyone come all the way to speak for 10 minutes and give the kids some books and then leave and without wanting anything? So no, I said, no, thank you. I'm all right. And this is what happens today in the world, As soon as you are generous and you open and so say, he's lying, he can't. There are no people like that who don't want anything. How could anyone just do it for free? How do you mean? Well, there are still a few, and I hope you're the same. With the same attitude. I mean, so what? You want to do something, you do it. You don't do it for profit or for money. You do it for your own satisfaction, because this is how you are.
Well, I happen to actually believe, I actually have a line, I don't know if you noticed in my email signature, it's a Talking Heads quote, never for money, only for love. And I live by that. And I think the kind of irony of that is that when you have that attitude and when you do things that you're purely passionate about, that's when the opportunities to actually make something out of it arise. Like it's funny how that works. And I was going to actually ask you, with the rallies and stuff, that's actually where I got my career started in sailing. I worked for a World Cruising Club for a while. In fact, we met at a house in Annapolis at a World Cruising Club party briefly, probably 15 years ago now. But that's pretty big business now. They've got the Oyster Around the World rally, the Outremer's got rallies, the World Cruising Club's got rallies all over the world. Did you, when you first organized those people in 1986 in Las Palmas, wherever you were, was the idea there that there could be a business here? how did that side of it evolve?
No, it was never a business. It never became a business. When I left the Ark, first of all, the first Ark in 1986 was free. The second year entry fee was 50. By the time I left and handed over to World Cruising Club in virtually 2000, the entry fees were 100 pounds. Now they are between 1,500 and 4,000 pounds. It is a business. It was never a business for me. The Ark was not a business. The Round the World Rallies is not a business. The Highlight Challenge, Latitude Challenge, no, it's not. Noonside wasn't a business. It was free. Now you have to pay. It's not in my mind. I'm very well. I don't need more money. I earn enough. That's it. That's not my purpose in life. And I think that this is why I'm disappointed with the Ark, that this has become a business. Because in my days, and this what we're talking now, the Ark was launched in the first one in 86, the fall of communism. We had boats coming from Russia, from Poland, especially Poland, from the Czech Republic in those days, Czechia now, Bulgaria. And they came to the office and smiling and said, well, we would like to take part. And then that told them, and you don't have money for the entry fee. Yeah, exactly. I said, I tell you what, I have a very good friend who is sponsoring people like yourself. So I contact him and I'll see if he'll pay your entry fee. And the morning after comes up, you're lucky. He said, they're sponsoring. There was no such person, I didn't want to say that I was the sponsor, but anyone from Eastern Europe was free, and I never charged them. But I want to tell you one story because it is quite amusing. One day I came to Las Palmas a few years later, maybe about 5 years after the first Ark, and there was a small Hungarian boat, an inshore boat, a 30-foot boat, and for the Balaton, for the Hungarian lake. And these two young men wanted to sail around the world. And I was very concerned, but I said, okay, fine. I said, all I can do is, would you like to go and have a nice dinner tonight? I said, well, I tell you, they said, of course, we'd like to. I could see that they didn't have much money and so on. So we went to this place, and there was a place in Las Palmas where the Ark started on the island of Gran Canaria, where you could eat as much as you could. And I want to say that a couple of months ago, I was in Budapest. One of my books in Hungarian was being published there, and I met one of them. And so he remembered what they did. So we went to this place where you start the evening and the dinner with the starter, the main course, and so on, desserts and so on. And they were really feeling themselves, and they were very, very happy. And they said, this was fantastic. And I said, would you like to have anything else? No, not really. No, you would like something. So what would you like? Well, if you don't mind, could we start again? And they went back to the starters and back to the main course. And so I said, well, these two young sailors must be really very hungry.
So do you resent the fact that sailing has become big business now, and a lot of the not just the rallies, but you see it everywhere you go? Marinas are being bought up by private equity. Everything's going very much up market, and kind of making what you did in the early days not impossible, but just harder. How do you feel about that?
I feel very sad about it because it is like everything else. I mean, football, any sport, tennis, everything has become so commercialized, sponsorships. Yes, I understand that the sportsmen and women want to earn a living, of course, and they deserve so. But it's not them who make the big money, it's the investors and so on. And this makes me very sad. It's a kind of world that I'd rather not live in. Because if everything is just business, if everything is only how much money you make, why are we here? And this is what makes me so sad about what's happening to our world. Because I saw the world and I've been to places where they've never seen a white child or a white woman. There might have been a man, an Australian planter or so, but we've been in those islands and so on. And you meet those people, the genuine, the hospitality, the generosity of these people, and the beauty of the environment, and they're the people themselves. And I go back 6 years later, it's not so good. I go 20 years later, it's much worse. And then I go 40 years later, and really, it's really bad. And I feel so sad what this world is going to, and we're going into this abyss with open eyes when we could actually sort it all out. There is enough food on this planet to feed everyone else and to take care of health and so on. And it's very sad because I was so fortunate to spend all this time with my wife and 2 children in the early days to see a world that doesn't exist anymore. Maybe in Antarctica, which is still my favorite place, if you really, and you're on your own small boat, you manage to get out of the way and see some of the places, and you sit in the middle of a penguin colony, if you can stand the smell. And this is how the world was for 5,000 years ago, and this is how the world was for 50,000 years ago. And it will not be like this 500 years from now, not even 50 years from now. It's very sad.
I've asked my friends this question. Have you been back to a place? Because and the gist of this question is this just human nature, or is this something real about this? Have you been back to a place that you've been to previously and some amount of time has passed where the place is actually better than you remember it in the first place?
I haven't been to hell yet. It's probably better. No, I cannot. No, I think that mass tourism has destroyed many places, starting with London. But certainly, I was in Romania a couple of weeks ago, and in other places. They're certainly not better. Maybe a place like Cadiz. I was very pleased to see how many areas of the city have been pedestrianized. That is an improvement. Some improvements are narrow improvements, not places like the trains in France, for example, even the motorways and so on. Things have improved, but the cities themselves, the atmosphere, has deteriorated because of the numbers. Antarctica is a very good example.
But do you think that's real, or is it just this? I mean, this is kind of what sort of, not to make this political, but like MAGA nostalgia has this idea that in the past it was always better. So do you think this is real, or is it just some trick of your brain saying that, well, it was better before, but you're actually misremembering? Do you understand what I'm asking?
I do understand, and I understood your question the very first time. What I mean, I don't compare it with an ideal sample and so this was ideal. Look, you go to a restaurant, okay? And you remember other meals, the service and the price. Is it better? No, it's not. It's very difficult to find a good restaurant here in London to really say, no, really, that food is how I remember it. And I have a very good taste. I know from wine and so on. I say it's not, and the prices, I compare the prices. So I think when I'm making, I make an absolute comparison. I'm not comparing London to whatever. No, I'm talking about the city itself, or the restaurants, or public transport. No, actually, I should say that public transport in London is much better than when I was came here 50 odd years ago. But I'm talking about the places. I'm talking also, I have to do it from the point of view of a sailor arriving in a place. And I already saw that on my second voyage, and I saw it on my third voyage. So things have deteriorated, primarily because of the numbers. First, it was tourists, just tourists, and then, of course, also the boats. There's too many boats arriving in a place, and then the size of the boats. When we arrived in a boat, a 36-foot boat, with a woman and 2 children, people understood this was a family. It was very easy to identify. When I went back into the Caribbean a few years ago, and there are these huge super yachts, 100 foot, 150 foot, 200 feet, 120 meters. And they go in there, they have all these special toys. So don't tell me that the situation is not worse than before. It is. So I think that what I said, I stand by what I said. In certain aspects, the situation has not improved. It is worse than before.
And yet you remain optimistic.
I remain optimistic. No, I cut the optimistic. Hopeful. No. There's a big difference. Optimistic is sometimes being a bit naive. Hopeful means that you are really, in a way, altruistic, because I hope for not for myself. I mean, I've lived my life. I mean, there's not much to hope for or being optimistic for. But generally speaking, I'm very sad for so many people not to be able to enjoy this world, which is such a wonderful world. I mean, which is being, in my lifetime, is being destroyed. Even in my sailing lifetime. I'm a diver, and I remember the places we went diving, amazing. That free diving to 20 meters, all fantastic. And then I went back 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20 years later, destroyed. The pollution, the plastic on the beaches, the dirt, and so on, the lack of fish, the death of the corals. We're destroying this planet. And a lot of people, 90% of the people even now in the Western world, don't realize how bad the situation has become.
Do you feel at all responsible, given the inspiration and the knowledge you've passed on to other sailors? I mean, does that, because you're sometimes attributed to that as the father of modern cruising with rallies and stuff. Do you feel that's accurate, and do you feel responsible at all?
Yes, I do. Would I have not done it if I thought at the time? Well, no, because it was all out of my goodwill, and I wanted people to be able to experience the same things that I had experienced, and to have the same opportunities. But you're absolutely right. If you look at it objectively, yes, I have some. I'm responsible for it. The only mitigation is that it would have happened anyway. I don't think that I might have initiated it, but I didn't set an example that couldn't have been done by anyone else. There's nothing or that original about it.
So the book I use most for our business, because we take paying crew on long voyages on 2 of our boats that we own, and I sit down once a year and make our annual sailing calendar. So of course, World Cruising Routes, World Cruising Routes is the latest title. Speaking of change,
the next one will be World Sailing Routes or Routes. Yeah.
World Sailing Route. And okay, so, but like the hardest thing for me, most of my sailing's in the Atlantic. We've spent the last 2 years in the Pacific, but sitting down and trying to understand, I understand the weather patterns in the Atlantic. I understand where we can be and where we can't be at certain times of the year. I understand most of the routes back and forth. But when we went to the Pacific, and now we're starting to think about going around the world, it's much more complicated. And I'm curious, I know you've done the research, like it has changed with weather patterns, because like that's how we got to plan the seasons and stuff like that. What have you actually seen in terms of when you're planning a long distance voyages on a calendar? Can you even, are there safe seasons anymore, so to speak, in different parts of the world?
Well, you don't have enough time for us to go through it. I have to summarize it. It's very, very difficult. Yes, everything has changed, but as long as you are aware of the changes, are aware of the dangers and the hazards you might encounter, you should be prepared for them. But I feel that what I would like to say to your question, and I might attempt to answer that in more detail in a moment, everything depends primarily on your attitude, you see? And this is what I would always stress. It's no good having a big yacht, a good yacht, very well prepared, all the latest equipment, all the money, funds, everything, if you have the wrong attitude. And this is why I said maybe that in the first place, my having a boat was a means to an end. But it shouldn't become a means to an end, a voyage. My boat was a means to an end, but the voyage was always a dream. I wanted to sail around the world. So I believe that if you, like people going up Mount Everest to say that they've been there. If you want to sail around the world to say that you've done it, well, don't do it because you have the wrong attitude. If you really, really want to do something because you love the ocean, you want to see the world as it is still now before it is too late, then do it. But the whole point is that you have to look at yourself. And that is something very important to describe in a few words. Everything depends on you. If you are happy and fulfilled and you feel that this is what you really want to do and that the family wants to do it, because very often the couples, maybe the man is a dreamer in most cases or not, then it's the wrong place. And then it's a means to an end, and don't do it because you will be disappointed. And I speak from the experience, not personal experience, but the experience of I had with all the participants in some of my rallies and so on. And I knew the people who had the wrong attitude, and I could see how they got themselves into trouble, how they were unhappy, how they abandoned their voyage. So I think this is the thing that I would like to say in the margin of your main question. As far as getting prepared, well, this is why I'm writing this book. That's why I'm working today now. Look, I'm looking back at when I started with this. This is the oldest routing book in the world, virtually, published in 1973, no, published in 1896. But this was the third edition that I sailed in the first round the world voyage. And I look back and I say, oh my God, how much I've learned, what should go into the world sailing routes, which is now in this 10th edition. So I think that in many ways, you or anyone else who is planning a voyage, you have now the opportunity. The aids to navigation are amazing. I sailed around the world and I had to do a passage to Amotus when I was still with my sextant. We had no speedometer, no depth reader, nothing, zero. Even the time I had to listen to the radio to get the time to work out my position, and we could have lost the boat and possibly our lives there. All that is gone. Everything now is perfect, really, as far as navigation is concerned, and all the means to go to and the quality of the boats and so on. So anyone who wants to do it, everything is there. Excellent forecasts, weather forecasts, short-term, long-term, and my books and other books. I'm always, in all my books, like World Voyage Planner or Work Sailing Routes and so on, I'm always thinking not over the experienced sailors. I'm saying, look, this is the basics that everyone should, be aware of. So this is why if you get into any trouble, it's probably your fault. You can't blame it on anyone else, or maybe if you have a collision. But basically, if you're on your own and you have a problem, either you shouldn't be there at the time of the year, or you have the wrong boat, or you have the wrong attitude. And I should maybe start with the attitude. So basically, a lot depends on you now. Because in the old days, if you ran out on a reef, well, we didn't know there was a reef there. And you couldn't out, But nowadays, there's not an excuse. You haven't zoomed back into your electronic chart to actually see that reef, which you don't see if it's zoomed out. And this is why in the new edition of World Sailing Routes, I have now obtained permission from the Hydrographic Office, British producers of the United Kingdom charts, Admiralty charts, to use charts to give them as an example for planning and to say, even in these days of electronic charts and all the rest, you should still have at least one paper chart to see everything that's in the North Atlantic or in the South Pacific. All the island groups and even every single offshore reef is still marked there. It's all there, which you will not see on if you navigate with an iPhone or on a very small monitor. So again, coming back now to your question, yes, everything is there for you to prepare and carry to completion voyage anywhere in the world.
That's really, I hadn't thought of it that way before, that you don't have an excuse anymore. Like it's that, like when something happens, it's your fault. I like that. What are you most proud of?
I'm not proud. I think it's a deadly sin or whatever it's called. I know I have nothing to be proud of. I'm very happy or very pleased. My children do well, or my grandchildren do well at university. No, I don't want to be proud of anything. I think I'm at peace with myself, that I've done nothing to hurt other people, that I've always lived up to my principles. I'm sometimes stubborn. It used to be even more stubborn when I was younger. And I want to give you just one example. When I eventually, with help from someone we knew who was very high up in the Communist Party in Romania, and also the help from the British government, we managed to get married. And then I had to apply for a passport to leave Romania. And I was called to the police because the police was issuing the passports. And there was a major there in uniform and said, "Here it is." And I looked at it and I said, "Yes, but that is a Romanian passport. What do you want?" "No, I want to live on a stateless passport. And I want to," on the brackets here, Jewish people from Romania, Germans who had lived there for 25 generations were leaving Romania because the Jews, by an international agreement, they could go to Israel. The Germans would go to Germany and so on. So they could leave. And in fact, some of the Germans were paid for by the German government. So I knew that there was a piece of paper that was a stateless document. And I told this major that I didn't want to have a Romanian passport. "Why?" I said, "Well, no, I want to live as a stateless passport. I want to be free." And he said, "Well, you refuse this passport and F off. No passport." So I came out and I booked a phone call with Gwenda. And I said, "Gwenda, look what I've done." And she was quite shocked, said, "But she knows me." And she realized that after what happened to me, my youth, my father in prison for most of my youth, and that I wanted to live on my own terms. And I may be the only person in Romania to refuse a passport to leave the country. Well, 6 months later, they gave me the passport and I left. But this is what I want to show you. When you are stubborn like me and you want to live by your own principles. And I said, "No, I've decided I want to leave this country stateless, and I want dissatisfaction because my father was in prison and died in prison, and I had to identify him, and I don't want to, because eventually we had to disinter him and so on." So I felt very strongly about it as a young man, and I still have those principles. And I think that I've lived all my life not being ashamed of myself.
What do you I have a sort of a sidebar question here, because we had an experience a couple years ago. I wasn't on board, but one of our boats, Falcon, was sailing from Jamaica to Havana. And about 130 miles west of Havana, they came across a family in a home-built raft of Cubans who were trying to escape to the U.S. And their raft had a windsurfer sail that had come down. They had been adrift for 7 days. We had a Spanish speaker on board. They stopped and communicated with them. It's a long story. I've told this on the podcast before, but long story short, they ended up taking on, it was a 10-year-old boy, his mother, her husband, and his brother. And they ended up taking them on board and taking them back to Havana, and they were arrested when they arrived in Havana. But in the process of them standing by and assisting this family, 2 or 3 other sailboats, recreational sailboats, sailed past, didn't answer on the radio, didn't offer any assistance, whatever. This migrant crisis that's happening in Cuba, but also in the Mediterranean, even more pronounced for those of you that live in Europe. What do you feel is, do you feel like the sailing community has, what do you feel the sailing community's responsibility is in instances like this? Because we had a long debrief on what we could have done, what we did do, what other people didn't do, and what is like the message we want to get across to the wider sailing community, that what do you do in cases like this? Because it's not uncommon anymore to come across things like this. And you were literally one of these people trying to escape a communist country. So how do you feel about this? And what would you say to the wider sailing community, the cruising community that may encounter this?
Well, the answer is very simple. The law of the sea has not changed. If you are on a vessel and somebody is in distress, you have an obligation, not moral, you have an obligation to help that person. So if somebody is in a raft and you are on a floating vessel, you help them. And this is why, we're going back to the Second World War, that the British Admiralty had ordered you don't shoot people who are escaping a sinking submarine or a ship. You try and save them. And they did, sometimes at their peril. So I think nothing has changed. So if you are on a yacht and somebody is in distress on another yacht, in a raft, anywhere, you have an obligation. It's an obligation. It's not a choice. You have an obligation as a mariner to come to the rescue of the others. And this was what is so criminal of the American authorities now destroying and shooting boats that are suspected to be smuggling drugs. They probably are, but you still shouldn't do that. Because if somebody is then in the water, you should actually make the best to save that person. So again, I come back to your original question. You have an obligation to come to the rescue of someone who is in distress.
It was interesting because I think one of the fears is, and one of our concerns was, this family's trying to escape Cuba. If they realize that we're taking them back to Cuba, are they gonna get violent? Are they gonna get funky on board? I was in conversation with the U.S. Coast Guard, and they said, well, if you're worried about that, you can bring them to the U.S. We'll intervene and we'll pick them up and take them, and then we'll take them back to Cuba. It doesn't have to be your problem. So it was a fascinating 24 hours. It was a very sad story because one of these things, when you have this encounter with real people, it's easy enough to talk about this when it's anonymous, but when you're there with real people, it changes the calculus, I think.
Yeah, no, I would have taken them to the US, or I would have met the US Coast Guard vessel and handed them. I would have not taken them, especially not me. I've been to Cuba many times.
Yeah,
I wouldn't have taken someone back to Cuba. No, definitely not.
Yeah, well, they ended up. I left it up to the skipper on board, Chris, I said, look, I support whatever decision you want to make. They had an open conversation with the family, and the family was basically happy to be helped, and they were accepting of they were told basically they're going back to Cuba one way or another, and it was a peaceful, fine thing. And we ended up staying in touch with this family over the years since. So it had somewhat of a happy ending. Some of them eventually did get out of Cuba. But it was an interesting situation that kind of, what do you do about that? How do you think about that? And Chris was horrified that 3 other boats passed by without even answering on the radio. That was the biggest lesson. Like, this is just unacceptable.
Yeah.
So, well, Jimmy, I don't want to take up more of your time. I'm excited to see the new edition. You said the new book is coming out as an app?
No, yes, the 10th edition of what is now World Cruising Routes will come out as World Sailing Routes, and will have an app. My son Ivan is doing it. It will be something, it's very briefly, it gives the opportunity for anyone to take any route in the book and see the prevailing winds, the recorded in the last 10 or 20 years, so you more or less know what to expect. It's not replacing the up-to-date weather forecasts, but you can see anywhere, first of all, the prevailing winds, secondly, the risk of tropical storms, the areas covered by the tropical storm, and also the frequency, the months that are critical months, and so on. So the new edition will be really very much expanded, also take into account the consequences of climate change on the sailing routes and so on. But the advantage also of the app will be that the app will be can be used not just with the new edition, but with all the previous editions of both World Cruising Routes or the World Voyage Planner. So it is one of these, and also it can be used offline. So it means you don't have to be online to be able to look. If you change your mind and you are sailing to the Caribbean and you need to decide you should rather divert to the Azores, let's say, then you can look what the kind of weather can I expect, even, as I said, offline. But then, of course, you go to the current forecast. But if you are planning and you want to see what kind of winds are there in September and are the tropical storms, the app would say just that. Maybe we can talk this when nearer the time, because it's not coming out before early next year.
Cool. That's very exciting. I like it. Last question for you. What is success to you? What does success mean to you?
A job well done.
We'll leave you with that. Thank you very much for your time, Jimmy.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Yes, that was a difficult question, but I'm glad I answered it. You have it. So what I would like to send you by email now, I want to my various routes. I sent you yesterday the books. Some of the. Do you need them or you don't? Do you have images, or I have never seen your podcast, so I have no idea.
Send me some stuff. There'll be a web page associated with this episode that will put up all the information that you want to promote on there or share on there.
No. So what I'll do, I still have one book and five the 5 boats. That is quite nice to have the picture of my first. And the atlas also, just a cover of these things.
Cool.
And if you need, just come back, because I'm very happy to send it to you. And then
cool.
You do get a copy. I'm looking back at the top of your head there. For the routes.
I've got, it's behind me, World Voyage Planner and World Cruising Routes, and I use them when we plan the calendar. I mean, amongst my other books back there, but
new edition. I mean, I think you should get my. I'll send you, if you send me the address. I don't have a copy now. My work, Steer the World with me. I'll send you the cover.
Send me. I'd love to get a copy of that. I actually didn't know that existed. I was just looking at that on your website before we started talking, and I would love to have a copy of that.
Yeah, so you're in Norway now, but you're in
Sweden. I live in Sweden. I'm American, but my wife is Swedish, and we live in Sweden.
Where in Sweden?
In Enköping, about 40 minutes train ride from Stockholm. So we have a 36-foot 1971 OE 36, Ola Enderline 36, that we sail here in the summertime in the archipelago.
Okay, fantastic.
Yeah, it's nice.
As I said, I have to get a new copy of my book, but I'll send it to you personally for your address, and I'll email you. I'll email you, or I email you or send them with WeTransfer, whatever.
Sure.
It's only 5 or 6 images.
That's great. So nerdy audio question. When you were whatever happened to all those BBC recordings, and were you carrying around like a reel-to-reel tape recorder on your first trip?
Yes, I had two Uher tape recorders. I could do all the editing, and they would then send the final tape. And I sent them mostly by British diplomatic bank. I would go to the nearest embassy or consulate, and they would send them to the BBC. They would take it because it was the BBC. But I also did this kind of work for Radio New Zealand, for Radio Australia, and then I was always sent tapes. And then much later, I was able to go to the radio station, and they would then somehow transmit the program. Not digitally, but whatever they did it in those days. No, it was quite, and I had all this. I still have the scripts. I don't have the tapes anymore. I didn't keep the tapes. I have some original recordings from music and people interviewed, but it was all recorded and sent to the BBC that way.
Would it be possible to get any of the English speaking clips that I could play on our podcast just as a sample?
Yeah, I have a sample. No, I don't have it. Yes, I have an interview. But the most interesting is that, because I can send you the music with it as well, I hope. There is a nose flute that you blow with your nose, and it's in Tonga. And the king of Tonga could not be woken up by a human voice. So there was a person who would play this tune, okay, to wake him up. And when he was awake, he played another tune. So I recorded this for the BBC, for myself. And then that recording I have, and I also have the recording of the music. I don't know how I could send that to you, but that maybe my son Ivan will help me, because he's in the film business. He'll be here the day after tomorrow. So this is it's very interesting, and that will be very good. So basically, I interview him. He answers in Tongan. It's being translated by somebody who was there. Then I have the music live and the music live twice. So it's a wonderful tape. And I have this tape. I have it on my iPhone. And so because I sometimes listen to it myself. This I could send, but otherwise, I can't. No.
I would, man. If we could get that sample, that sounds so interesting. I'd love to have that.
No problem with that.
Cool.
Yeah, I'll ask Ivan, and then I'll send it to you. Probably by WeTransfer. It's probably not very high. It's probably quite a lot, but I have no idea how big it is. But yes, I'll do that because it's also an interesting story to go with it, and I don't know how. It's the only tape I kept. I managed to keep this one, and it's very good because from beginning to end, it's my voice. I'm interviewing this person. He answers, he plays it, and it's all live.
Oh, that's awesome. I'd love that. Well, hey, thank you very much, and we'll be in touch on email. I appreciate your time.
Okay, and I'll send you all the various things that I mentioned. Okay.
Cool. Thanks, Jimmy. Take it easy.
Bye.
Thanks again to Schooner Woodwind and BVI Yacht Sales for sponsoring this episode of the show. Buy your tickets at schoonerwoodwind.com and buy or sell your dream boat at bviyachtsales.com. On the Wind is the podcast about sailing, created by 59 North and hosted by me, Andy Schell, and August Sandberg. The show is mixed and produced by me and August in Sweden and Norway, respectively. The intro theme music is composed and performed by former podcast guest, sailor, and musician Cameron Dale, while the outro music you're hearing now is, of course, by our friends, the Storm Weather Shanty Choir from Bergen, Norway. We love hearing from our fans, so send your questions and comments to holdfast@59-north.com, and please do us a favor and review the show on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget to join us on the Quarterdeck as well to nerd out about seamanship. That's quarterdeck.59-north.com. Until next time, hold fast.
And when me money was all gone on liquor and the horse, I made up me mind that I was inclined to go to sea no more. No more, no more, to go to sea no more. I made up me mind that I was inclined to go to sea no more. As I was walking down the street, I met sweet Angeline. She said, come home with me, me lad, and we'll have a cracking time. But when I awoke, it was no joke. I found I was all alone. My silver watch and my money too, and my whole bloody gear was gone. Was gone, was gone. My whole bloody gear was gone. It was when I awoke, it was no joke, for my whole bloody gear was gone. As I was walking down the street, I met Big Rapper Brown. I asked him if he would take me in, and he looked at me with a frown. He said,
last time you was paid up with me, you talked up no score. But I'll take your advance and I'll give you a chance to go to sea once more.
once more, to go to sea once more. I'll take your advance and I'll give you a chance to go to more. Sometimes we're catching whales, me lads, but mostly we get none. With a 20-foot oar in every paw from 5 o'clock in the morn. And when daylight's gone and the night's coming on, we rest upon our oars. And oh boys, you wish that you was dead or snug with the girls ashore. Ashore, ashore, or snug with the girls ashore. Oh boys, you wish that you was dead or snug with the girls ashore. Come all you seafaring lads that listen to me song. When you go a big boating, boys, make sure you do not go wrong. You take my tip when you come off a trip, don't go with any whores, but get married instead and have all night in bed and go to sea no more. No more, no more, to go to sea no more. Get married instead and have all night in bed and go to sea no more. No more, no more, to go to sea no more. Get married instead and have all night in bed and go to sea no more.